When it comes to raising your fees for your lessons, there's a lot to be scared of. I know, you might be worried that everybody's going to quit or that they're going to come back to you and say, well, why are you doing this? And why now? And what makes you think you can charge this much, right? And deep down, we know most of those things aren't going to happen. For the most part, no one is going to react that strongly or be that harsh to you. And you're probably not raising them that much to have that kind of reaction anyway, but the worry is there, and it is totally understandable. When you go to raise your fees, you're considering what you might lose. And what you might lose are your favorite students, and that's a big deal. But raising your fees is so important, and it should be done regularly so that you don't have these sudden increases where people really will quit. So let's go through some do's and don'ts to help you raise your fee. The first don't. Don't apologize. Whatever you do when it comes to raising your fees, I do not want you to apologize. Instead, let's think about gratitude. Anytime you go to say sorry, whether it's about raising your fees or about anything else, try saying thank you instead. You need to tweak the sentence a bit sometimes, but I'll give you an example. Instead of saying, I'm so sorry I didn't email you back sooner, you say, thank you for waiting for me. So how does this apply to raising your fees? Well, so many teachers go into that email, that announcement of raising your fees, from a position of apologizing. Now, most teachers don't actually say, sorry, I have to raise my fees, but they imply it. They say things like, I'm afraid I have to blah, blah, blah. That's one of mine. Maybe that's just in how I naturally speak, but I'd say, I'm afraid I have to do this, that. The other, or other ways of implying that we're sorry that we have to do it. But you shouldn't be sorry. You should be grateful. You should say, thank you for being part of the studio, and have that sentiment behind what you're saying. But you don't need to apologize for raising your fees. The next don't is not to justify. Do not justify raising your fees. Instead, show the benefit. Show your parents, explain to the piano parents what it is they're going to get instead of justifying. Here's how that might play out. So let's say a common email I see going around is a teacher saying, I'm sorry I have to raise my fees this year. Here are the extra, I have this extra expense, I have that extra expense, I'm spending too long looking up repertoire, this is changed, that's changed. That's all me. Imagine someone came to you with those arguments. Imagine you got an email from Netflix, why not? And Netflix says, we're so sorry, we have to raise your prices to $20 a month instead of 10. I can't even remember what Netflix costs, but something like that. I'm so sorry, I have to raise it to $20 a month. We regret to do this, it's horrible, but we have extra taxes to pay in your country now. That would be their reason with us. We have to replace our data servers. What are you thinking? You're thinking, that's your business problem. I mean, why didn't you account for the taxes in the first place? And it's not my fault your computer broke. Hey, I was already paying you that fee and now you're saying I have to pay you more? It immediately gives you the wrong frame of reference. Where if Netflix came to you, now you still might balk at this with Netflix, but if they said, we're raising it to this much because we want to produce this much percentage more films because you're all demanding, you're all saying that you want this and that and the other. If they're adding features and they're telling you why this is happening, that's a different conversation. So when it comes to raising your piano teaching fees, you need to come at it from the perspective of what this will do for them. Now that can be trickier because maybe you're not adding anything. In most cases, you don't really need to justify it at all. So in a lot of cases, leave it out entirely. But if you do feel the need to justify it, and that would be if you're making a big jump, and we'll talk about that more in a moment, but if you're going to make that big jump in your fees, then you might feel the need to justify. And where that need is strong within you, that's where you come up with the reasons. And there should really be reasons if it's a big jump. And the reason is not, I haven't raised it in years, because that's a you problem. The reason is, I want to provide this, that, and the other to students. I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that. We're adding workshops, or we're adding this new app that we're going to use, or whatever is happening. You can have a reason for a big jump, but you don't need to justify it and come across defensive to your students. What's our next don't? Do not, very appropriate in black and white, grandfather. Instead of grandfathering your old students in at their old rate, maybe you do want to consider having a system for people to reach out to you if they are genuinely in financial need. So many teachers will say, oh, but parents aren't going to be able to pay the new rate, and I don't want to be unfair, and what if they have to quit and then their child goes without music? Again, first of all, if you're charging a fair rate, that's not up to you. They need to prioritize music or not. And if you are making that big jump, you probably have a reason for that. However, if you want to come up with a system, as I have, whereby people can apply to you if they have a financial circumstance where they need a reduced rate, that's different. So I have what I call a scholarship form. You can call it anything you like, but I include that alongside a lot of fee information. Not as a, no matter what, you can apply for the scholarship, but I would include some verbiage right now along the lines of, I know finances are very different for many people right now, and things are looking quite difficult in some circumstance. So I want to make sure that you know that we have this scholarship application form. If you're struggling, I don't want you to feel like your only option is quitting, or that kind of wording. That wouldn't be exactly what I said, but something like that. So you're providing an option, but you're not defaulting to everyone who was on the old rate should stay on the old rate, because why should they? I just don't see a justification for that. And it usually leads forward to these resentful situations. Maybe you've had one of these yourself. I see a lot of teachers saying, oh, this family, they just don't appreciate what I do for them. They're always picking up their kiddos late, and they don't pay me on time, and they do this, that, and the other, and they're on this super low grandfathered in rate. I'm like, that might be why they take all those liberties with your policies and everything else. I don't want to say give people an inch, they'll take a mile, but we do train people in how we should be treated. And if they haven't seen you as a strong business entity, they won't treat you as one. So, not a fan of grandfathering in. The next don't wait. Please do not wait to raise your fees. This is the biggest mistake you can make. If you take one thing away from today, and remember, J-Dot, it's always fine to just do one thing. So if you take away one message from today, I want it to be this. Do it now. Not right now, this minute, but this year, okay? Don't wait. I raise my fees every year by a few percent. Most parents barely even notice a few percent. Those that do aren't going to think it's a big deal. It's just, the fees for things change every year. That's fine. It's when you wait and you have to jump up by like 10, 20, 40, 50% because you're so far behind the market. That's where you have a problem. That's where people are going to quit, and that's where you end up with the wrong clients, the wrong people in your studio. So don't wait. please, if you haven't done a fee increase in a while, make a big jump. And then, this is the part that requires so much bravery, and I do understand. Make the big jump and then do it again next year. Like raise your fees a few percent next year. Or commit to raising a significant amount, but not a huge amount, for the next several years until you catch up. That's not my favorite, to be honest. I think you should jump, because I think if your fees are really low for where you are, if you're way below the going rate, you probably have a lot of the wrong people in your studio. The people who were just worrying about prices. Question from Michael there. I think one of the reasons that teachers don't raise rates is because they're not marketing enough to fill their studio and increase demand. So this is a weak position to negotiate from. That's interesting, Michael. So yes, sometimes teachers will not raise rates because they feel like, well, I'm not getting students as it is. But what most teachers don't realize is your rates are probably not the thing turning people away, or probably not the reason people don't sign up with you. In fact, for some people, and in many cases for your ideal clients, if you're the bottom of the barrel, that's the reason they're not signing up. The customers you really want are not the ones who are bargain hunting. So I see the fear, but honestly, you need to raise your rates in order to get that respect from the market, from the people in your community. Not out of the range of what's reasonable for where you live, and that's different everywhere, so I'm not going to give out any rates here. But you need to raise up to the standard price or higher on the high end, so that people respect your studio and see it for what it is, for the value that you give them. And I know that you're running a great studio. I haven't ever asked that question on this stream because you're investing in your professional development right now. You're watching a video right here. You could be doing something else, but you're not. You're learning about bettering your studio, and I know that means you take your business seriously. So, great question, Michael, but I think we need to see things differently, and yeah, just to push through that fear, because I know it's a real fear. Our next don't stay the same. Even if you're not going to raise your rates, even if you're not going to go up, my modest 3%, as I often do, don't stay the same. Figure out a way to make your rates change, even if they're not going to go up for whatever reason. So maybe they go 1 year up or down, or there's a different structure in the calendar or something like that. Figure out a way to make them change. Your enemy is stasis. It's having the same rate for several years in a row, because then people think, well, that's what you are. And then it's a big reaction when you do change them. But if you change them every year, things are going to be different. People are going to get used to the fact that it changes. They sign up September to June, or whatever the case may be for you, and then they get a new fee list and they get to make the decision based on that. So maybe sometimes they go down slightly, but you've actually given yourself an extra holiday. That's fine. Just don't stay the same. What if other teachers in my area are not raising rates? I also have difficulty knowing what other teachers charge and what other kids' activities charge for a comparable private lesson. That is a tricky issue. And it's maybe outside of the whole raising rates issue, is like, what do I charge in general? That might be something we do a separate video about. But other teachers not raising rates in your area, I don't think is a good reason for you not to. If you're way above what the market will bear, if you're way above what other people are charging, that's one thing. But if you're not, the 3% is still my advice. Most teachers in my area don't raise their rates. I wish they would. I want to see them, treat their businesses well and respect our profession and push things forward. But most of them don't. They don't change their rates. And I think that's a mistake. But it doesn't affect what I do, because it doesn't change anything for my clients. They never come to me and say, well, so-and-so didn't raise their rates and yours go up 3% every year. Like, that's just, no one is paying that much attention to me. In my opinion. Our next don't. We've got 2 to go. Do not make people think don't make people think. Go all inclusive if you can. Now this is a more gentle recommendation, okay? But definitely don't make people think. Make it a simple fee structure. My favorite fee structure is monthly or semesterly standard rate tuition that stays the same throughout the year and is on a regular recurring amount, and that is all inclusive. So what I mean by all inclusive in my studio is all my students' books, their folders, t-shirts, bags, whatever. It's all included. It's all standard. And that is a huge convenience for parents, and it means, yes, they don't have to think. Many parents will be shocked by other activities, and they're familiar with this feeling, and it's not fun, right? You sign your kiddo up for dance, and it's a certain price, and that's great. But then the dance teacher says, oh, no. They can't come into the class until they have this exact leotard from this shop, and ballet tights, and ballet slippers, and also jazz shoes, and also tap shoes. Well, why isn't that if every child needs this and none of them have it, and you demand it's from this particular shop, then why isn't that just included in your fees? I mean, it's much more predictable for other people's finances, and they have to have it, right? So I love all-inclusive fees. And it really is a huge thing to do. And this is a good example of something where you could not raise your rates, but still change your rates by making them all inclusive, right? So it's just a restructuring. And if you feel like you don't need to raise your rates this year, although in most cases you should because of cost of living increases, but if you're in a position where you really don't want to, or you only want to put them up 1% or something, maybe you change some kind of structure around the payments, and that could be moving to all-inclusive fees or just including some things. One of the reasons I love all-inclusive fees so much, by the way, is because the more we move forward, the more we have digital resources, things like Vibrant Music Teaching, where you get all your games, things like subscription book resources or studio license books, app subscriptions, all of these things. They're for all your students. And it's so hard to parse them out. And how are you going to charge for them? And it's so much easier to just include all of that and all of their books and all of their resources. And it's easier for parents. They don't have to think. Nobody likes thinking. I mean, they do sometimes, but not about stuff like this. So don't make people think. Try all-inclusive fees or some other simple fee structure if you've been doing things lesson by lesson, book by book. All right, the last don't. Don't wait too long, but do give a little notice. So I want you to consider doing it right now. Hopefully this is a good time of year for you to consider doing this. So if you haven't already set up your fees for next year, I have. I've set up my simple table that I share with parents and all of the calendar and everything that goes along with that at this stage. I only just did it though. You've got loads of time. If you haven't done that, now's the time to do it if you're in this hemisphere to get things ready. And then you do give a bit of notice. I mean, I give my parents the new information at the end of 1 year, and then they need to hand it in the middle of July, and that's for the next year. So if they want to go find a cheaper teacher, okay. I mean, I'm not way high in the market or anything like that. But if they did want to go bargain hunting, well, that's fine. They're not the client for me, honestly. And I know I'm coming at that from a position where my studio is full, it has a waiting list, and I acknowledge that that's not where all of you are. I still had this attitude right at the beginning, though. I really, really did. I maybe took on some less ideal clients in terms of what they were looking for in lessons, very exam-focused students, people with certain preferences that really don't fit that well in my studio now or in my style of teaching. But I always raised my fees and I always gave them this notice, and I always have the attitude of, if they decide not to come back because of a 3% increase, they are not for me. They're just not. So I hope you'll raise your fees this year. I hope I've given you some confidence to do it and some ideas about how to go about it.